Hey, welcome back everybody. So we are going to be walking through some more Adobe Illustrator, and today we're going to be talking about the grid and putting shapes in a grid. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new document. I'm going to go ahead and create a letter document, and I'm going to make it landscape and hit create. Okay, so on the last tutorial, we were just making shapes, like kind of putting them anywhere. Let's go ahead and give this some kind of color, and that's fine, and that's something that we do often. But I want to show you how to be a little more precise if you need to be careful where you're putting things, or be more precise where you're putting things. So let's go ahead and go to View, and then go down to Show Grid. And then you're going to have this grid here, okay? Now this grid is not really there. So we can all see it here in Illustrator. And when I zoom in, the spaces get bigger, but it's actually not anything visible. It's just a guide for us. And I could use it like this, and I could try and fit my shape very precisely in one of these little square, or these two squares here, or however you want to use them. And sometimes I use this when I'm drawing and I want to kind of match things up, see where they are in relation to each other. But there's another way we can use this grid, and that is by going to View and going Snap to Grid. So when we snap to the grid and I make a shape, it's going to want to snap right in place to one of these points, one of these little intersections of these grid lines. So I can make another one. Whoops, cancel. Let's see. So I can make another shape here. And however I make it, it's going to want to snap there. And what it's snapping are these anchor points here and these paths. And I can see it a little better if I take off my stroke, which we can do over here. And go to my stroke color. And I can go all the way over here to none with a white box with a red line in it. Hit none. And you can see it done over here as well. And now I have no grid. And now I can see that it's snapping right on those lines. And that's the path. Now, the stroke, let's go ahead and put a stroke again, can go outside of the grid, and we can vary the size of that. But what it's aligning, or what it wants to align here, are these anchor points. So we can also snap some shapes directly right into those boxes. Let me go ahead and take off my stroke again. I keep hitting the rectangle tool when I'm not on anything. And I have to deselect it, and I have to go back to the rectangle tool, and I can make multiple boxes. And they're going to, by default, fit right within that grid, when there's in those little spaces, or any set of spaces. All right, so very helpful. We're trying to be careful. Okay, one other thing I want to show you is how to duplicate an object, and that is done by your black arrow. You can click on your object, hold down Option, and you get the little duplicated arrow. So I have a black arrow and a white arrow behind it, and that's showing me that it's going to duplicate it, and it's going to give me an exact copy of that object. I can keep doing it as many times as I want. I can even select multiple objects, like these boxes right here, hold down Option, and duplicate all of them. And when you have boxes that are really small, sometimes it's a little bit harder to grab with the black arrow. Let's say I try and duplicate this one. And now watch, as I'm trying to get close to it and get that little duplicating symbol of the black and white arrow, it's kind of hard to find because there's so many little options packed into this little space. And I can't even find it. I've found it before on this small space, but I can't find it now. It's a little easier if object's bigger. And it's also easier if I'm grabbing multiple shapes, because it's not giving me all the same options. All right, so that's duplicating shapes and duplicating them within the grid. So let's take a look at what some of the other shapes do within the grid. So let's try an ellipse and check it out. Wherever I make an ellipse, the paths want to touch the grid, even if it's not a perfect circle. It still wants to kind of fit within the grid. And let's see what a polygon does. So polygon looks like it's kind of all over the place. It is still trying to hit some increments, and I can see it moving in increments, but I'm gonna hold shift now, but not like exactly hitting my grid in any precise way. Let's move over a little bit. Let's try the star tool. And I'm gonna get the same thing. It's kind of trying to fit within the grid and hit points here and there, but if I hold shift here, it is keeping it in the middle of one of those lines, those grid lines, and move it in increments, but not always exactly hitting the edge of any points or set points. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And lastly, let's look at the line segment tool. And let me go ahead and give a stroke to it. Let's go ahead and drag out a line. And pretty easy to make it go straight, horizontal or vertical. And if I want to go at a diagonal, it wants to snap into place somewhere on these intersecting grid lines. Okay, so that's the way the grid interacts with objects as we make them. One last thing I want to show you here is how we can change the grid. So if I go to Illustrator up here, to Preferences, and then I go down to Guides and Grid, I can click on it and it gives me this window. Guides we're going to use a lot, and we'll talk about them in future tutorials. But right now I want to look at this section of the grid. Some things we can do is we can change the color. We can pick different colors. We can create a custom color. Maybe your grid's a little too light. Maybe you can't see it well enough. You want to make it darker. You can change it from lines to dots. Frankly, dots are very hard to see, so I'm just going to keep mine lines. You can change how the increments between these grids. Right now it's set to 72 points, but I can make it less or more. And you can also change the subdivisions. Right now it's at 8, but maybe you like to work in 10 better, or maybe it'll work better for whatever you're trying to do. We can change the subdivisions, all right? Grids can be put in front of your objects, which you would see the lines on top, but generally I like to see them in the back because it doesn't interfere too much with what I'm trying to make. This is how you can see the grid above a 600% zoom. Usually I don't really worry about this too much. All right, so we have options on our grid and we can change those if we need to, but usually the default's pretty good. All right, so that is the grid in Adobe Illustrator. We can also turn it on and off, so don't forget about that. You can hide it. We can also take off the snap if we don't want it, and we can hide it. We have all those options available to us all the time. I'm gonna hide it back again, and there we go. All right, I'll see you guys on the next video.